Welcome back to the corner, everyone. I am the DM, as always, and today we're going to look at another Jaggerus video because he's going to talk about his video title. I'll hide my ugly face. The biggest problem with live service games that no one is talking about. Now, before we get into this, I'm going to try and be short and quick about this, but effectively, the problem he's going to be talking about is something that is not intrinsic to live service games. This is something that started with DLC. Where a game will be released without being properly finished, and then the game developers will fix it after release, right? And this started with DLC, where one of the biggest, most recent perpetrators of this that I can think of is Mass Effect 3, where there was day one DLC for a character's plotline that was the character's race was extremely lore relevant and extremely plot relevant, especially in this game and across the entire series. And it was a known fact that before the game released, his ending, the part of the game that would sort of tie it all up, was removed from the game. It was already in the game. It was developed in the game and everything, and then it was cut from the game to be sold as day one DLC. And that's where this all starts, is with DLC, where it was originally sort of made to help expand upon the game and give the gamers more to sink their teeth into for a single player game. And for the most part, like with expansions and whatnot, most live service games do justice to it. You know, there are some hiccups and issues with it, which we'll get into as we get into this video. But it started to get with live service because we'll talk about it as we get into it. Let's just get into it. I don't want to waste too much time before we
Hey
start
guys,
into it.
today
So
I
let's
wanna talk about what is the big problem with live services game today, because this doesn't have to be a problem. Game developers are turning it into a problem. I am not a live service game hater, brother. In fact, my favorite games are live services games. The games that I play the most are live service. Diablo 4, World of Warcraft, Dota 2, the game that I have the most amount of hours in. They all are live services game. So the problem is not intrinsically that they are live service game. In fact, this could be an advantage. You can progressively improve and develop the game. But that same thing, they are turning it into a bad thing. And what do I mean? I mean they are purposely releasing unfinished games, garbage games that they know are not ready, but they do it because they say, oh, we can fix it in the future. We can fix it as we go. And that, in my opinion, is bullshit. Why do I say this? I said this with Diablo 4. We all know that Diablo 4 was released unfinished. We all know this. And they have been fixing the game as they go. And now in World of Warcraft, The War Within, which, by the way, I am really enjoying the expansion. I am not throwing shade at the expansion because I am really liking it. But we can see that in the patch, the 11.0 patch that is coming with the 20-year anniversary, they are basically reworking hero talent trees that they just released, and they are already reworking that.
Which, by the way, this he'll get into it a little bit more, but I just want to hit on a point here. When a game or when a part of a game is released, and then within like the first 2 months, they are reworking massive parts of it. That right there is the very first indicator that it was released unfinished. They don't need to confirm it. They don't need to say that it was. It doesn't matter because it's the proof is in the pudding, as they say, right? And the pudding in this case is hero talents, right? Hero talents are trash. They're crap. They're fucking awful. Some of them are far worse than others, as he'll get into. And when this is the case, this means that they were not properly tested, they were not properly vetted, there was no actual quality control that went into any of them.
Ringer, a lot for the balance tree. the biggest one in my opinion is the Dark Ranger. When they revealed the Dark Ranger 3, we all said, and they revealed it like in March, something like that. So a long time to fix it. We said this Dark Ranger 3 sucks. They didn't do anything, they released it like that. Now, in the 11.0 patch that is coming with the 20-year anniversary, they are reworking the Dark Ranger 3 because they knew it sucked. If we knew it sucked, they also knew it sucked. But they released it that way, either way, because we can fix it in the future. Who cares? I don't like that attitude. Instead,
and the whole reason that they release it early is because, not because the developers, the people making the actual game, the boots on the ground people, it's not because they wanted to release it. I guarantee if you were to ask any of the, like, half of the Blizzard employees, most of them, if not all of them, would just say, no, we shouldn't have released it, right? But the reason why they released it is because of deadlines. Because the company and the higher-ups, the executives, say, this has to be released on this day, and we don't give a fuck. Release it on this day. If it's buggy, if it's glitchy, we don't give a shit. We'll just fix it down the road. Release it on this day, or you're fired. That's why the developers release it.
instead of what live services game should be is, we are going to release a good product, a finished product, and then we are going to improve it over time, and then we get something awesome. But that is not what companies are doing. What they are doing is, we are going to release a dog shit, unfinished piece of shit, and then we are going to fix it as we go. And then after a year, maybe it is in the point it should have been at release. What is that, brother? That is not what we should be getting in here. And I don't know, maybe Blizzard is getting away with it because they are Blizzard, but there are games that don't get away with it. For example, New World. New World was dog shit when it released. I wasted $40 on that. And then people left and the game is dead. So they have to be very careful with this strategy. But Blizzard is getting away with it because in Diablo 4 is also working. They fix itemization in Season 4, in Season 3, whatever. In Season 5 they fix other shit. Now with the expansion they are fixing progression, and you have to pay more on top of that. So they took more than a year to take the game to the place where it should have been when it released.
Yeah, so speaking on this point, the reason why Blizzard can get away with it versus Amazon, right? So World of Warcraft, it really boils down to something very simple. World of Warcraft is an established IP with an established player base that will play the game regardless and will pay them for all of their expansions and buy all of their cosmetics and everything, whereas New World was a new IP. It was not an established IP, it didn't have an established player base, it wasn't based off of any established IP, nothing like that. And so with new IP, it's a significantly larger risk, right? That's part of the reason why Concord failed. Concord is an entirely new IP that doesn't have an established player base, and it's made for people who are not gamers, right? So the people that Concord was made for are not going to play Concord because they do not play video games, right? And so that is pretty much what it boils down to as to why Blizzard can get away with this and why like Amazon with New World cannot, is because they're established IPs. Now, how do we go about fixing that? We take the same approach as if it was a new IP. That's what it boils down to. Is if you want to fix this, if you want them to change, if you want them to stop doing this, all of the players, or at least 80% of the players, any less, it's not going to matter. Any less than 80% of like hardcore dedicated players of the game, and I'm not saying like 80% of those hardcore, of the players that are considered hardcore. No. I'm talking about the 80% of the players that will just buy the video game, that will just buy the expansion. 80% of those players need to treat each expansion as if it is an entirely new IP. Anything less than that, Blizzard is not going to fucking care, because they're going to make enough money to justify releasing it early and patching it later. Because if anything less than those 80% do that, then 50% of those players that are like, you need to stop doing that, 50% of them with each and every patch, 50% of the ones that remain will just change their tune and be like, well, they fixed the thing I was complaining about, so I don't care anymore. And so they're just going to be like, whatever, Blizzard isn't going to care. They're going to fix one thing, and then half of those players are going to be like, well, they fixed my thing, so this game is great now. And then they will fix another thing a few months down the line, and then 50% of those remaining players will be like, well, they fixed my thing now, so I'm not going to complain anymore. And that's what they're doing with Diablo 4. Like he said, one season, they fix one problem. The next season, they fix one problem. The next season, they release an expansion that fixes one problem. And oh, look, everyone's going to buy the expansion that was complaining about that problem. So why should they care about the remaining? And you know what? So let's say, I'll give you a concrete example, right? Let's say that 100,000 people were complaining about various issues in Diablo 4, right? Let's say 100,000 people, right? And let's say the overall player base is 200,000, okay? So half of the active player base is complaining about all of these different problems, right? Well, Blizzard then goes and patches out one issue. So now half of those people, 50,000 people, stop complaining about the game and begin doing nothing but praising it, right? So now only 50,000 of the 200,000 are complaining. Well, that's even less. That means that they could take even longer because there's not as many people, right? And so, or actually, you know what? Let's restart the example, because I said 80%, right? We would need 80%, right? So because I'm not a mathematician, I'm going to, what is 80% of 200,000, right? So this is 160,000. Okay. So let's say 160,000 people are doing that. They fix one problem. 50% of those 80,000 people stop complaining. Well, now it's only 80,000 of the 200,000, right? So less than 50%, about 40-45%, right? So then they know, the not the developers, the company knows they could take a little bit longer, right? So they take a little bit longer to fix the next problem, but it's only one problem. But half of those people, 40,000 of those people, are the ones complaining about that problem. Well, they fixed it. Now it's only 40,000 people, right? And so now, with barely a fraction of the player base still complaining, not only can they take longer, now they can do it behind a DLC expansion, right? Where in the DLC, the progression radically shifts to an entirely different way, an entirely different method, right? But now those 40,000 people have to buy the expansion to get their fix, right? And they're going to, because they want to play the game, right? But they're not going to complain about how it's locked behind an expansion. No, they're going to buy the expansion because it solves their problem, right? So now we have another 50% of that now gone. So now it's 20,000. Now we're down to just 10% of the player base that's making any sort of complaints. At this point, Blizzard no longer gives a fuck about you. They see those 20,000 people and they do this. They write you off entirely. Because why do they care? You are 10% of the entire player base. If those 20,000 people stop playing, their bottom line doesn't change.
We told you that Ranger was dog shit, but now you are fixing it in a future patch and you didn't do it right at the start of the expansion. Why? So the problem is that they know that with a live services game we can fix it as we go. It wasn't this way when I was a kid and I played on PS1. You buy a game and it has to be finished because there is no patch, there is no few to download. This is the game.
Yeah, and so like he's saying, back in like the 90s and whatnot, back in like PlayStation 1 era, before like DLC and all this and all these patches could be done, your game was made or broken at its release. Like full stop. If your game was trash, the next one you put out, nobody's going to buy. Nobody. No one will buy your next game because it's fucking trash, right? And so the game, when it was released back then, had to be good, had to be finished, right? And there were bugs. Don't get me wrong. There were bugs out the ass. Look at Super Mario Brothers, right? For the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. That game has so many fucking glitches and bugs that you can beat the game in 5 fucking minutes. 5 minutes. And we're not talking about like wrong warping like in Legend of Zelda, right? On the SNES. No. Because that was still a game. That was still a thing, and you could do that. So what happened in that game is you would go down to where you rescue Princess Zelda, and then you would stand up against the wall, and the jailer that swings his fucking mace would push you out of bounds, and then you just walk straight up to the end of the game. Right? But it was still an amazing game. People loved it, and it became an established IP. People bought the next one, and 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 now we have fucking Tears of the Kingdom. Right? Super Mario Brothers, you could do a whole bunch of wrong warps, warp right to the fucking end, beat the final boss, win the game 5 minutes. Literally. The speed run right now, I think, is actually under 5 minutes. Like, that's how broken that game is. Right? The Pokemon, the original Pokemon on the Game Boy, the colorless Game Boy, by the way, not the Game Boy Color, the original Game Boy, is so broken. You can rewrite the entire game in the game. You can code in the game. You don't even need a game engine. You don't need to extrapolate the data, nothing. You can just, on original hardware, just rewrite the entire fucking code of the game. It's wild how broken that game is, but it's still an amazing game. So these games lived and died at release way back in the day before you could just patch things out.
And if it is dog shit, it's always going to be dog shit.
Yeah.
But now they say, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we can fix it in a patch. But why do it that way? Why not release something finished, something good, and then improve it? Because
takes too much time and money.
About live services game, that you can use this platform to improve the game, even fund the game as you go. Yes, let us pay for stuff like the sub. We are paying a sub, remember? And with that, you fund the development of the game for newer, cooler, improved stuff.
And they don't just pay subscriptions, by the way. Like, this isn't just a subscription. They also have an in-game store with their own proprietary currency, I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they have their own proprietary currency, which is priced in such a way that you never have enough or you have just over too much to actually buy the thing you want, no matter what it is.
Not to fix the game that I am already paying a base price for. You understand what I'm saying in here? So basically today, a live service game is a continuous beta testing game, right? You are perpetually in a beta testing state because they are releasing unfinished stuff. Let them test it, let them see if it is good, and if it isn't, we fix it. Instead of releasing finished cool stuff that then you improve. And yes, I've been giving praise to Diablo 4, for example, because the latest seasons have been good, because the expansion is looking good. But that doesn't excuse that should be the state that the game released in. That they screwed us over when the game released because it wasn't finished. They know it, we know it, everybody knows it. They released on purpose an unfinished game with the intention of fixing it later. That is what they did, and in my opinion, that is not good, brother. And the same thing is happening here with the hero talents. They know that there are hero talents that are not ready, like the Dark Ranger was, and they release it that way. For example, the Pack Leader too. The Pack Leader sucks. Maybe they are going to rework it in the future, and the same with all these passive talent trees that do nothing, and not because they are passive, but because they are not cool. You can have a cool passive talent tree, but they are not cool. And I am focusing on Diablo and WoW because these are the games that I know. But I know for a fact that this is happening across the board in all game development, in all companies, in all live services games. They release stuff and they fix it later, and we are continually beta testing their games.
Yeah, so live service games are just beta tests. Live service games, by their very nature, are in a constant state of development in perpetuity. They're until they decide to just shut off the servers. It is in a perpetual state of development. Now, one thing that Final Fantasy XIV does is when you buy the base game, you get all of the expansions up to the last one with the base game. You don't have to sit here and buy every single other expansion with it as well. The only time you have to buy like other expansions and whatnot is if it's a brand new one, or you have had your account before that expansion was released, and so you have to buy the expansion. And don't get me wrong, there have been expansions for it that have sucked. Stormblood is an excellent example of an expansion that was widely received, from what I understand, pretty negatively. Now, I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was mind-blowing. I didn't think it was as good as Heaven's Ward or any of the expansions that came after, but I thought it was a decent expansion. Right, it definitely had its problems, especially with like story pacing and whatnot, but I thought it was mostly fine. But one thing they do as sort of like to help onboard new players is just to give them the expansions. As well, not only do they just give you the expansions, okay, with this latest release of Dawntrail, your free trial can go you can play the game entirely free all the way up to the very end of Stormblood. You can play the entire expansion right up to the point where it transitions into the next expansion. And all free. There are some restrictions from what I understand. I think there are some chat restrictions, maybe some trade restrictions, whatnot, but like that's fine. You're getting so much content entirely for free, right? But you know, he has a point here, where especially with Blizzard, they release the product and they wait to see what the community hates about the product, and then they fix those things. And oftentimes, those things that they fix are things that the community has said need to be fixed before it releases, before it released.
So in my opinion, this is the biggest problem, because yes, the monetization is stupid. The not being able to access the game offline is stupid. If they close the servers down, you can't access the game is stupid. But those things don't affect the quality of the game per se. It does affect it, but it is not like the core game. But this is the core game. Like, the game is not finished, the game is not correctly designed yet, the game needs more work, but you are releasing it that way because you can fix it later. So this is affecting the core game, the most important thing. But yes, guys, that is why I think about this. In my opinion, the biggest problem for live services game, from someone that like live services games. So let me know in the comment below what you think about all of this. Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I a clown? Let me know everything. I love reading comments even when they don't agree with me, brother. Remember to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, all that cool stuff. Help me out, my dude. Guys, thanks for being here. You guys are awesome. God bless you. And remember, don't be afraid ever, because this is just a ride.
Yeah. So he's 100% right with everything he stated. by the way. Absolutely 100% right with absolutely everything he said.
We can fix.
So the biggest issue with this kind of mentality with the company, right, is because they are still being paid, right? So, in his previous video, he talked about, or the previous video that I watched and did a video on, he talked about how if you don't like it, don't play it is a really fucking stupid mentality and a stupid thing to say. Well, likewise, releasing an unfinished product and saying you'll finish it later is a stupid mentality, and you're a fucking idiot if you think that it's true or that it's worth anything at all. The core experience for a MMO or for a live service game is the immediate gameplay. If I start up a game, right, and it is from the outset dog shit, right? If I start up the game and I'm immediately hit with this class feels absolutely trash, why am I continuing to play it? Right? Another game that I played for a while but stopped playing was Last Epoch. I think Last Epoch is a pretty good game. However, the only class that I feel is fun to play is a pet build warlock or pet build necromancer, because the damage that it deals to just general enemies and whatnot, and the pacing of the class through the story and through the gameplay feels good, right? All the other classes do not feel like that. I've played all the other classes, or at least I've tried to, and I've played them up until about 10 levels after you get your specialization, and all of them feel trash. They feel bad. But no one says this. No one talks about it. If you go and you look at all the Last Epoch creators, they play and talk about these classes at the end game when they have items that make them actually function. And this is things that I've seen people in the game say as well, where there are just straight up abilities and builds that do not function and cannot be played without certain items because they're trash. Their builds, their balancing is trash. Okay? Necromancers, I can play a pet build necromancer, and the moment at level 2 when you get your, or one of the early levels when you get your summoned skeletons, you summon all your skeletons, and suddenly you're able to very easily enjoy the game. You're able to play the game. The game feels fun. You can do stuff. Your pets do stuff. The monsters don't take a shit ton of time to kill. And then, as you progress, the damage starts to, kind of fall back as monsters start to scale. But then you get your golem. And your golem just lets you walk through the game, right? And then eventually, when you spec into Necromancer, you get your skeletal mages. And oh my god, things just begin to flow easier and easier. And then you get your summon Wraith, and things just flow easier and easier and easier. And you eventually get to a point in your build where you have the survivability to survive things, and you can just begin to walk through the content. And it feels good as a pet build, right? But then you hit a wall where, and the game doesn't really do a very good job of explaining how resistance is and armor and health and all this shit scales. And so you get to a point where, so in the game, enemies have an amount of penetration equal, percent penetration equal to the level of the zone. So if and this is from an in-game guide, if a monster has 30% lightning penetration and you have 20% lightning resistance, the monster deals an increased 10% damage to you because your resistances against their damage is negative 10% because resistances can go into the negatives. So what that means is that at 75% resistance, right, if you are at a level 50 zone, that means you have negative 20, or you only have 25% resistance to that damage type. And this is a universal amount of penetration that all monsters have, right? That does not include armor. Okay, so armor is a separate stat that further reduces damage, and penetration only applies to like elemental, poison, necrotic, and whatnot, right? I do not believe it is armor penetration. But if they have shred, right? So if you have 20% armor, right? Then that means that damage after your other resistances, damage is reduced by 20%. But if they have shred, and they are shredding your resistances in one way or another, that means that you have even further reduced resistances. Now, in Path of Exile, they handle this a little bit differently, where they just show you on your resistances and they just remove that amount of resistance from your actual resistances. So you can see exactly how much resistance you actually have. But Last Epoch does not do this. And so with Last Epoch, you need at least 150% resistances at level 100 zone area in order to actually have that capped resistance. This is in the in-game guide, by the way. I've been told that I'm wrong about this. This is literally from the fucking in-game guide explaining in detail how the mechanic works. Okay, so if this is not true, you need to bring it up with the developers because this is how the developers explain it in their own in-game guide. But nowhere in the game is there a tutorial explaining any of this. Nowhere in the game is there a tutorial telling you, hey, you should open up the guide. You should look at these. This is how this all works. Nothing tells you to go and look this up, right? And so you get to a point where if you think that 75% resistances is the cap, and that anything further is pointless, you will very quickly get to a point where everything is just one-shotting you. And you're just getting obliterated by everything, right? And so it gets to a point where the game gets exceedingly frustrating to play. But again, it's a live service game, right? But these are bad design choices that nobody is talking about. Why? Because the people at the highest end of the game are just saying, it doesn't matter. Just push through it. At end game, it gets good, right? These are other problems of live service games that no one is talking about. But that's it. I've rambled probably for like another 10-15 minutes after he finished his video. So I'm going to end my video. If you liked the video, thank you all for coming to my corner. Thank you all. I have been the DM as always. If you liked the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. If you didn't like the video, hit the dislike, leave a comment letting me know why. And Jazzarus, if you're watching this video, thank you, brother. I love you, man. Keep up the good work, and I will see you all next time.